We have all, oh, perfect. We have all board members present. So we will go ahead and get started and call this meeting to order officially here at 6:30. So for a quick roll call, and I'd love it if y'all could just say hi, get your faces on the screen for folks briefly. So we have here Director Morris. You're unmuted, I think. You just want to say hi.
Oh, hi.
Sorry, I put you on the spot with this. Director Boler-Jack.
Hi, everybody.
Director Larson.
Good evening.
Wonderful. And then, of course, I'm Director Hoover. And then here as well, we have, as always, our fabulous Ms. Kaur, Dr. Herndon, and then so far, Mr. Howard. Thank you all for being here this evening. I want to just say welcome to folks here and to our guests. And I wanted to take just a brief moment. First, we just want to offer activation warning for those of you that may or may not be aware of the tragic events that took place this morning in Texas. So I wanted to take a moment to both recognize and honor the lives lost due to senseless gun violence and acts of domestic terrorism. Just 10 days ago, on May 14th in Buffalo, there was a targeted act of racism and domestic terrorism that took the lives of 10 people. On May 15th in Laguna Woods, California, and then just today, 17 students and 1 teacher were killed in an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, with more injured and fighting for their lives. That number has gone up just in the last hour. These terrible acts of violence speak to the deep-seated division, fear, and racism that is running rampant across our communities. My heart and our hearts go out to the families and the loved ones of these young people and the people that lost their lives last week. So I'd like to just take a brief moment of silence to remember and to honor those lives lost. Thank you so much. I want to just recognize too that it can be really difficult to continue to just go on with business as normal and do things, do work and life when these terrible tragedies occur. And so I just want to recognize that and honor the teachers who continue to teach today and will teach tomorrow. Yeah. So I just want to recognize that and hold space and know that we're holding each and every one of you in our hearts. So with that, I will pass it off to Director Boler-Jack for our welcome message and the land acknowledgement.
Yeah, we begin each meeting with a statement of our agreements from Courageous Conversations. We pledge to stay engaged, to experience discomfort and be vulnerable, to speak our truth, and to expect and accept non-closure. And in light of the tragedy in Texas today, we remember the tragedies over the centuries to those who walked this land before us. So we recognize the Native Americans whose land we stand on. I am in Maryland. I stand on the tribal land here of those who walked this land for centuries before being colonized and driven off into many other lands. Those of you in Washington recognize the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot and all the other Native people who inhabited those lands, and we give honor to them and pledge or promise to move forward, recognizing the beauty, the wonder of the land, and those who have cared for it over time.
Thank you so much, Director Bolerjack. So moving on to our approval of the agenda, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second, any objections? All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful, heard 3 ayes. Great, so it stands approved. Now we move into our public comment portion of the agenda. So just as a reminder for our new public comment process, there are multiple ways to both submit or offer public comment, either in writing by noon, the day of our meeting, or you may offer a live public comment by either raising your hand or entering your name into the chat. Ms. Kaur, do we have any public comment today?
I did not receive any, and I'm looking in chat and for raised hands. I don't see anything in chat or any raised hands.
All right. Well, seeing none and having none, we will go ahead and move on to reports. And just as a reminder, there is a public comment opportunity at the end of the meeting as well, if things do come up as we're having conversation. Yeah, so there's another opportunity that later on. So moving on to reports, we'll start with the superintendent report. So I'll send it to Dr. Herndon.
Good evening. I hope everybody can hear me. My apologies for no video at this point. Apparently there was an error on some sort of technical piece. So as long as people can hear me, that's great. So for the superintendent's report, I appreciate President Hoover acknowledging the tragedy that's happening. These are the words we continue to hear over and over again. Tragedy and senseless and targeting and mental health and all of these issues. And all of those things are true. And there are things that, you know, we, especially as young people in any community, should have to deal with. And yet we continue to deal with these issues over and over again. I've been an employee in several different districts and have actually gone through this issue twice before. And they are challenging for every community. And I would hope that no community has to deal with this. And what I will also say is usually this is a case where they are also planned. They're rarely spur of the moment. So I would highly, highly encourage any students, any adults that hear anything about this to let somebody know, because the best prevention is to prevent this before it actually happens to begin with. So I will be curious to hear more information about how or why this unfolded. For some people, it may make sense, and for other people, it will probably never make sense. So definitely a tragedy for sure. I'd also like to just talk about a few items that are coming up. We're in the last month of school, so we have 4 weeks left. I know that's a very exciting time for our students and our families as they look forward to the summer, which we might actually have in Seattle, as well as staff. But also this is a very frantic time. Again, there's a lot of stress and pressure out there as the school year ends, a lot of uncertainty for some students and families. So please be aware and allow space for conversations to happen in classrooms amongst students and amongst staff. So we want to make sure we're providing those opportunities. Additionally, I know we have a couple of students participating in some extracurricular activities this week, different levels, and we'll continue to perform some activities throughout this school year, whether they be plays or presentations or athletic events. It's always great for our students to have that opportunity to participate outside of the classroom, and I'm glad we're able to offer those options for our students and families. Additionally, I do know that Foster recently had their prom. That was last week on Saturday. So I'm glad they were able to have that event. I'll touch base on that briefly, just in the COVID report coming up next. Also, we are looking at hosting a couple meetings on activities that we've been talking about throughout most of the year. We have a stakeholder summit meeting scheduled for the strategic planning. That will be next week. I believe we have that on our website. And that's an opportunity. It looks like from, let's see, it's on Tuesday, the 31st. From 5 to 7 p.m. So it's an opportunity for those who participated and maybe those who have not to hear some of the feedback that we've already seen. The Center for Educational Effectiveness and Mr. John Steach have been gathering the feedback and kind of putting them into some broader goal categories. And so that's the conversation that we'll be having next week, is to get some feedback on that and hopefully hear from many different parts of our community and the feedback for that strategic plan. So we're excited about that. Additionally, we will be doing the same for our SRO process. That also, I think we're nailing down that event Tuesday, June 7th. Again, an opportunity for people to provide feedback on that, to talk about what we might look for in an SRO program or an alternative to the program, whatever that may be. So again, we'll be gathering the feedback that's been happening from the various stakeholder groups that we've been meeting with over the past several months. And then we also have Foster graduation coming up. That's June 10th. That's also coming up very quickly. So an opportunity to recognize those graduating from Foster High School and have the chance to celebrate with them. So we're looking forward to all of those pieces. And I believe that's what I have for my superintendent's report tonight.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Dr. Herndon? Okay, great. We'll move on to the COVID report.
Great. Again, I appreciate the diligence and work that we have with our COVID team, making sure we're keeping our PPE and number of tests available. Again, we have been, just like with the county and kind of Tukwila, been having this uptick of cases. It hasn't been the major spike like we saw with the Omicron variant, but it's been kind of this slow, gradual climb. If you were to look at some of the information on there, you can kind of see this happening for Tukwila. We've been seeing that both in students and staff. And the way it's been kind of playing out is that we'll have a few in each building, and then those folks will quarantine, go through our protocols and come back. And then we have a couple more that will go out after those folks come back. So it's been kind of this trade-off. We have been seeing that rate starting to slow down, which is always good. So we're hoping we're on the backside of this particular wave that's been coming to us. We did provide for the prom that I mentioned earlier. We provided 180 test kits for students testing before they went to the prom, and then made those tests available after prom too, before returning to school. I don't have numbers about what the positivity rate may have been with that, but I think just being able to provide those tests for our students both before and after is really a good mitigation strategy for us. I think it would also be wise for us to do that for graduation so that we can provide that. So we'll make sure we have enough test kits available for graduation. We'll still be outside, which is great, but still, it's kind of a group setting, better for people to have that ahead of time. And I know that there may be some people who might test positive, and if that does happen, please, we will figure out something for graduation, but please do not try and show up to graduation if you've tested positive. We will figure something out, but we really are trying to remain as health conscious as possible. So part of that is knowing what we can. So we'll make sure we do have a good supply of tests available, so that shouldn't be a problem. We'll make sure we order more though, just because if we're going to be doing that, we want to make sure it's available for not only the students graduating, but also any family members that may be attending. So we'll make sure we have tests available for that. Other than that, I don't think we have a date yet for our next COVID clinic. I know we were looking at the provider we've been working with, Somali Health Board, had wanted to make sure we had a kind of a threshold number of people available, just so that it's efficient for their staff and having vaccine availability. So I'm not quite sure if we've met that yet. And we will be coordinating that with also the availability of boosters. I saw the FDA did approve getting boosters for children 5 to 11 as well. So that combination of availability, hopefully we'll be able to get something scheduled before the end of the school year going into summer. And then I think also in August, we'll make sure we schedule something for boosters. Just a lot of the conversation around kind of the length of effectiveness for boosters being about 3 to 4 months. What I've been hearing is that there are many folks who are thinking about kind of putting that off until the school year gets started again, rather than taking it now and then kind of maybe having the effectiveness of the booster almost waning by the time the school year starts. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll be able to make both things available, an opportunity in June as well as in August. So as soon as we get dates available, we'll make sure we communicate that out to staff, students, and families for that availability. So that's what I have for the COVID report.
Any questions for Dr. Herndon around COVID? Okay, I have two real quickly. So this is kind of the, I mean, I know that, you know, we've been seeing an uptick in cases, certainly, you know, over the last month and a half, maybe a little bit more than that. But I think, you know, we're able to kind of see how effective some of the processes that we were able to put in place back in whenever that was, February, I think. So I'm just kind of curious around the communication loop, how the quarantine specialists are getting, staying on top of making sure that students who are out due to COVID are getting their assignments and so on. So kind of where are we at with all of those things that we put in place? How are they working? Have you heard any feedback? And then have we surveyed the staff recently about how communication is going and how they're feeling?
Yeah, so a couple of pieces. I don't have the specifics on the communication for students out. I know that number has been pretty low until the last week or two. So previously, I mean, we have our quarantine specialists available still for the buildings, and the numbers had been pretty low. So even now, the numbers typically like two, you know, 1 or 2 in a building. I think Foster might have 6 students right now that are out. So those numbers are available. I'll make sure I get them from our COVID team just to make sure I can get you any information on that. I haven't heard any feedback about people not being connected with the information they have, but the absence of information doesn't necessarily mean that it's all happening well. So I just want to confirm that for you. And then we did have a communication or survey a couple of weeks ago about COVID communications going out. That seemed pretty positive. There were some other communication areas that staff seemed to be interested, but as far as COVID went, that was all pretty positively received. So we'll do that again, especially because we have been seeing an uptick, as well as maybe information depending on how things are evolving over the summer going into the fall. So before the school year starts, like items or areas that staff will want to make sure they know about and are up to date as the school year gets started. So we'll be doing both of those things.
Okay, perfect. And then you kind of just spoke to, I think, my other point of like, really thinking about proactively how we can make sure that we're planning for these particular things that broke down this year around COVID, how we're planning for those things to be more effective and strengthened going into next school year. And just, so just the forethought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Before we move on to the director's reports, I did just want to recognize and welcome our student representative, Samuel Fiapito has joined us. Welcome, Samuel. So glad that you're here. Welcome back. And
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I've just been really busy with like family and school as well as sports. That's why I've missed like a few meetings.
absolutely, that makes total sense. But so glad that you're here. Look forward to hearing a report out if you have one to offer us here momentarily. So with that, we'll jump to director reports. Would anybody like to go first? There's not an official order that we have to do, right? It's just
Usually the student goes first, so.
the student goes first. Okay, there you go. Samuel, would you like to give a report?
I don't have much to report on other than we just had prom last Saturday, and I believe we sold like about 115 tickets, and we had it at the Pickering Barn. We had our COVID precautions all in place. Like if you wanted to take a test home, you could. And yeah, it was a lot of work planning it because as a junior class officer, we planned everything for prom. And yeah, other than that, a lot of students are feeling like burnt out because it's like the end of the school year, but we're trying to plan some fun events. And I believe we have like a pep assembly for next week. I believe we have a pep assembly next Friday, so it's kind of like a farewell thing for the seniors. And we have our senior we have all of our seniors festivities beginning next week, as well as like painting the rock and everything. And yeah, we recently also just opened up the gender neutral bathroom, which is good for those who need it. And yeah, that's been good. It's been like a smooth transition because the week before we opened it up, we were given lessons. We were given much needed lessons about gender neutral and all the vocabularies and why it is very much needed at our school. And yeah, so that's been great. I've learned a lot myself through that. I've learned a lot, even though I thought I didn't need to know. But yeah, it was a great lesson in all of our history class, and I'm happy all of the students within our schools were able to get it through their history classes. And yeah, I think that's all I have to report on.
Great, thank you so much.
I can go. I attended the Stories of Arrival presented by Carrie Bradley's class at the Spice Bridge. That class is just a very dynamic family, and they really supported each other while they were sharing their stories, and their stories were extremely moving stories. It was a great presentation. I did some class presentations at Foster in science and math, and realized I need to buff up on my algebra skills. And I understand from my neighbor who attended the prom that it was a huge success. And I was really impressed with the fact that the school district provided a bus for them since it was in Issaquah. So thank you for doing that. Hope to see a lot of the staff at the staff celebration on June 2nd. There's food, festivities, fun, door prizes, and celebration of years served, retirements. So hope to see a lot of you there because you are greatly appreciated. Thank you.
I can go next. Yeah, I was going to mention the staff appreciation thing. I'll add to what Edna said, games and prizes and awards, recognition of retirements and other folks that are leaving the district this year. But the highlight is the taco trucks. 3 taco trucks will be parked in front of Foster High School. Tie you up, Thai food, actual taco truck. And the other one is a panini truck. So you can go kind of healthy if you want to. So really looking forward to that. I got to visit the 5th grade camp one time when it was out at Lincoln Park. They were having a great time finding the crabs under the rocks and touching them. And it was pretty amazing. I don't know how amazing it was for the crabs, but Mr. Camacho, you deserve a medal for pulling that together, and your environmental ed classes that acted as the counselors. That was just a wonderful, wonderful alternative when we can't do 5th grade camp. Also, I went to see Miss Cyphers did a presentation on Ruler at the high school. And I learned a bit more about Ruler. I really think it's a valuable tool that we're putting into our curriculum at all levels. And I also attended the Stories of Arrival. I attended via Zoom, and the stories are incredible. And I encourage any of you that haven't seen those stories to buy the book. It's a great one to have on your coffee table when people come to visit, and you can brag about what our Tukwila students have been able to do through the struggles and the blessings of their lives. And I think that's it for my report. Thank you much.
So attended a number of different meetings over the last month or so, learned different things. So one of the meetings I was at was a group called the Data Advisors Group, which is a group of people from the Roadmap project, the 7 districts in South King County. They get together and talk about different data issues. And one of the things that was interesting to learn was that one of the things we don't get much data on is how our students that are in foster care are doing. And it turns out the reason for that is there was some data mix-ups at Olympia in terms of they don't actually track that very well. And so hopefully that'll get fixed and we'll be able to, equivalent to, we get a fair amount of data on the students experiencing homelessness, but not so much on our foster students. So hopefully that will clear up and we can kind of track how those students are doing in our system as well as throughout the state. The other, I was in a couple of different meetings where, so what has been a pretty big topic in the area in the state recently is the student protests around sexual harassment and the whole area of what they call HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And listening to some of the students talk about it and listening to what some of the other districts are doing about it and looking at our own policy on it. One of the things that I think we've been kind of missing from our own procedure is in our own policy, we say there is supposed to be an annual report to the board of directors reviewing the use and efficacy of the sexual harassment policy. And I don't think we've had that before. So it'd be good to get that on the calendar. And I was listening to what were going on in places like Bellevue and Shoreline. And one of the things, and also listening to when some of the students are talking about it, they're talking about, reporting systems that, are easy to use online, allow anonymous reporting, that kind of thing. And so that, we can have a better idea of when these incidents kind of things, whether they're harassment, intimidation, bullying, whatever, we get a better picture of what's going on and and so I would recommend that we kind of take a look at what some of the other districts are doing in that area and see if we can, improve some of our reporting and monitoring of that situation, because it's it's really obviously critical to obviously the students that are the victims of it, but just in general to the whole system. So I spent actually a couple of 5-hour Zoom meetings on Friday and Saturday with the WASDA, the School Directors Legislative Committee, where we are going through and reviewing all the various legislative positions that the School Directors Association has, and updating them, consolidating them, getting new ones and so forth. And so, as you may recall, we submitted 4 of them to this year, and all of them got included in what's going to go forward to the entire WASDA body in September. These were the 2 around changing the word fully to amply, and also the getting more support staff for CTE students, and also the one related to more counseling support for the Running Start students. So all of them got incorporated in some of the proposals that are going to go forward for voting in the assembly. They're really long Zoom meetings, but hopefully there's a lot of consolidation, which should kind of focus a lot of the efforts of WASDA on some key issues, and that should be good. So I've had to fight a few times to get the equity concept included in there in the wording, but it was a good conversation. So hopefully that will work out well. I got the opportunity to go up to be a panelist at the University of Washington School College of Education course, graduate course that they're teaching to potential future building administrators and district administrators, to talk about the funding system and the inequities in the funding system. So I was pretty excited to do that. It's being taught by a professor who wrote an article that I communicated with in the Seattle Times earlier this year about the whole issue of equity and funding, and the fact that we don't have an equitable funding system in our state. So it was great to be able to talk with some of the future leaders in the area in terms of buildings and district leaders. And I guess the last thing I'll throw in, it was great. So I was able to go to the high school drama theater group's production of She Kills Monsters, which I think was the first time they've had a production in, I don't know, a couple of years now. So it was really a couple of highlights from it. First of all, it was obviously a tough thing for them to pull together, because they had a lot of students canceling out, and even up to 2 weeks before the production, they had to go out and recruit a bunch of students. Actually, they went down to Showalter and got a bunch of students from Showalter to come up within 2 weeks. And it was impressive because at least one of them was one of the main characters, and she learned her lines to the T within 2 weeks and did a great job. And they also did a really nice job, which one of my little pet peeves over the years has been, the fact that we didn't really have good body wearable mics. And so a lot of the sound system and some of these things were not very good, but this year it was pulled off. Good congratulations to the tech team, which is also students who pulled off the sound system on that. So it was a really good production, and it's glad to see everybody was able to. It's one of those many things that we've had missing during the pandemic, and it's just brings kids together. And in this case, it actually brought Foster and Showalter students together, working together to produce this great play. So anyway, that's what I got. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. And for my report, just got a few items. I've had the opportunity to, I feel like I'm still, really getting my feet wet and in a lot of ways. And so I finally had the opportunity to go and do like a little bit more of an in-depth tour at Showalter and Tuck L. So it was a really great opportunity to see some of the amazing things that they're doing, and really more specifically, like to see the visual representation of a lot of the things that I'm hearing about. So that was a really, really lovely experience, and really grateful for the folks showing me around and the teachers that I got to meet. And I'm excited for more opportunities to be in buildings and engaging with young people and engaging with teachers and staff and everything else. So that was really exciting. And I've got this, I think, scheduled out to go visit the rest of the schools. So I'm excited about that. As everyone's aware, I've been working on the gender inclusion practices work for the district. I'm really excited to hear, Samuel, that your experience with the lessons. And one thing I'll say to you is, like, we all have more that we can learn about anything. And so, like, I am still learning all the different aspects of even around gender. And so, like, I'm so grateful to hear that was a rewarding experience. That was I know a really, really big lift for the history teachers. They worked with a consultant to put those lessons together, but they really did a fabulous job pulling it all together and utilizing student voice as well for those. So glad to hear that that was beneficial and that the opening of those bathrooms were successful. That's been a work in progress, not just for the last 2 months, 3 months, but really since one particular student started advocating at the beginning of the school year. So it's been a fight. I'm really excited for that. So we're kind of moving into the next phase of that work. So we've been focusing really on getting this happening at Foster. And now we've got an advisory group that is meeting. We've met twice now. Our third meeting is tomorrow. And then we meet at this time, we're meeting every other Wednesday from 3 to 4. So tomorrow, and then 2 weeks after that. We'd love to have you join us if you're interested in doing so. At this point, I'm really excited about the kind of the wide range of representation that we have in this space. We've got parents, teachers, some community members, no students yet, but I'm really hopeful that we'll get a few as time goes on, and we're getting the word out about this group more and more. So again, kind of the intent of that group is really to focus on first the policy perspective, really setting up some listening sessions with students, with community, to really make sure that we are guiding and educating and providing opportunities to bring the community along in this work, as well as push us forward in it, because it is so vital and important. So yeah, that's been really, really exciting. And then I just kind of wanted to share just just some appreciation and gratitude for the patience, support, and guidance and time that I have gotten from so many different folks as I am navigating different things. I had, stepping into the role of president has been both rewarding and a little bit daunting. So I'm just really grateful for, again, the patience and the support, particularly from Ms. Kaur. Thank you, and Dr. Herndon as well, and then to each member of the board for just talking me through things, old processes, always making sure that I have an understanding of kind of where things were before we try and do different things. So I'm just so appreciative of each of y'all. So that's me and my report, and yeah. So that brings us now to the consent agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I heard 3 ayes, so it is approved. And now to board discussion. So this is regarding kind of our move to hybrid meetings. Dr. Herndon, are you presenting this or?
Yeah, I can get us kicked off and then I'll probably have Mr. Baker join in.
Great.
So there's been conversation amongst the board for quite some time about having the ability to be able to host board meetings in person, as well as have that simultaneously happening online, also to the ability of having some level of interactivity from folks who may be watching online, mainly that ability to comment publicly with the audio, but matching up the audio and the video without feedback and not having a production studio could be very challenging. So we've been looking at some of the equipment Director Larson, I believe, and some others had mentioned a system that the city of Tukwila has been using. So we did send some staff down there to take a look at that. So we're looking at the technology to be used in that way. We've been working on this for months, quite honestly. Part of the challenge has been some of the equipment being a challenge to order. Backlog issues still continue to be an issue for some equipment. We did also look at contracting out that ability with another contractor to do some of that technical work. That would have started to add up pretty quickly, and I'm not sure that was where the board might have wanted to use the dollars the best. I think by getting some of the actual technology for ourselves, it allows us the opportunity to use that technology in other ways for either professional development or some of our staff to use. So before I turn it over to Mr. Baker, recently the governor also sunsetted some of the OPMA waivers that he had put in place under some of the COVID emergency declarations. So for the past 2 years, the governor has allowed a suspension of much of the OPMA rules for boards as they were meeting. So those are all sunsetting at the end of this month. So starting June 1st, there does need to be a physical location for the public to attend a board meeting. It does not mean that all board members have to be present, but we do have to present that opportunity. It could be one board member, all board members, no board members, but basically we have to provide that public space available for folks. And also now, interestingly enough, I've never been in a school district where this hasn't been the case, but there was an update to the OPMA that required now there be a public comment section in each board meeting. So I have not been in any school district where that wasn't at least an agenda item at some point. But for some school districts, now they don't really have a choice. So they need to do that, as well as offer the opportunity for people to either submit their comments in writing by a certain time or date, which is what we do, or to be able to present that verbally themselves. So luckily, there's a lot of that change that the board has been working on, and we've been trying to support over the several months. That puts us into compliance with the OPMA. So this last piece with the technology coming into place, we will be in compliance with all of the aspects and updates for OPMA by providing that physical location back in the boardroom. I think before each board meeting, what we'll probably do is just get a sense of how many board members will be present. Again, depending on what's happening currently with the status of whether it be COVID or something else, you never know. If there's a public health emergency, you could still host some of these meetings remotely. So we just wanted to make sure we had the technology in place, and I think we're going to have that happen. I'll turn that over to Mr. Baker now to talk maybe a little bit about the technical support that we're looking at.
Yes, there were 2 members of the technology team that went over to the Tukwila City Hall to look at what they're doing there. And the 2 members that went over were very excited and just about the technology of these owls, these devices that allow you to broadcast through Zoom, audio and video at the same time with very little echoing, those types of things, which has always been our challenge when we're bringing people, when there's multiple people on a panel and other people are in the room. So they were very excited about what they saw. We've gone and done a purchase order for 2 of these owls, and they do have multiple purposes for the district aside from just board meetings. And we can get creative with how we use them in terms of instruction and communicating best practices to some of our staff. So we're really excited about that. And again, our goal is to have things in place by June 14th for that first meeting in June for all of you. There are still some things that we need to work out once the owls arrive and we see how it all fits together. But my tech team did get a real sense that it's not a huge setup in terms of making them operate and work effectively for these types of meetings. So that's kind of where we're at. They have been ordered, and then we just need to kind of get them in the district and begin to, I guess, experiment and play around with them a little bit based on some of the information that we receive from the vendor, as well as other people who are using them. So we're very encouraged by these devices. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I'll just say, so WASDA, I've been on a few meetings at WASDA that uses the same device, and it's gone pretty well. So I think it's another example of this technology does seem to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just excited for the opportunity to be back in person and also continue to provide access for folks that can't be in person to be on our meetings and have access to these spaces. So thank you to you and your team for really looking into this. I know it's been a hefty project. So I'm really glad to see it kind of coming together, and it'll be in place just in time.
Yep. So the goal is June 14th.
I guess the one thing I will throw in, I know when I was over in Pasco and they were doing this, and we had like, I don't know, 28 people or something in the meeting. And when you play around with it, you might, one of the things to do, we had to, for example, all the people in the room had their own device and were on Zoom, but we had to mute all our sound on Zoom in order to prevent the feedback. So when you kind of set the stuff up and go through different simulations, you might think about whether all the board members need to be on Zoom or not on Zoom, and what the correct sound settings and all that things are, because you do need to get that correct. Otherwise, as you say, you get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, we'll be doing all that ahead of the June 14th board meeting. We'll get some panelists kind of representing you all. We'll have kind of a dry run in terms of the board meeting, and we'll have somebody in another room watching the Zoom to make sure that it's all working properly. So, and if there's any glitches from now until then, you will be made aware of it.
I can't wait to see who you cast in my role, Mr.
That hasn't been decided yet, but we'll see.
I think it'll also just be a learning experience. Each one of these meetings we do will continue to work out. So, you plan the best you can, you try and troubleshoot, but hopefully people will have that patience for us to learn to get a little bit better at the system as we move along. So I'm excited about the possibility as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. I was going to say the same thing. There may be glitches before, and there may be glitches after, and that's okay. We're gonna get through it and going to continue to learn and fine tune those things as we go along. So I think there are likely a few things that I guess I'm curious around more for the group. And I guess one question for Dr. Hernan and Ms. Kaur, particularly around the public comment. I know that there were some things that may need to be slightly adjusted as we move back into a hybrid public comment. Is that true? Or are we okay with the procedure and policy as it sits?
Yeah, I think we're okay with the way it sits right now. We'd be in compliance with the OPMA option for that. There were two things. One, we do have that submission for the day before, so that we know that. There are some school districts that do that as well. So you have to submit your comments, or at least sign up, and then the day of usually the next day of the meeting, they would go through their sign up list. But you don't have to. And for us, I think the advantage to that is if we know someone needs some additional assistance with their public comment, either translation services or any other assistance, then we can hopefully get that in place. So that's helpful. But then for the in-person, I think that's the point of making sure there's a physical location so that if someone shows up, much like we did public comment before the pandemic, people would just sign up at the sign-up sheet during the meeting and then provide their public comment at that point. So I think we still have those options and will be covered for the public comment portion.
Great. And then as far as like, I know you mentioned, just knowing a few days ahead of time from which board members would be in person and which wouldn't. I'd be kind of just curious if folks feel comfortable having this conversation, like where you're feeling right now about being in person, and then like if there's any sort of, I don't know, how we want to navigate that as a team and as a group.
I guess I plan on being in person when I'm in town, but love the option when I'm not.
And I would prefer to be in person.
Yeah, I think I will come in person, depending on, obviously what the status of COVID is at the time. I may or may not be wearing a mask. Depends on all those things.
Okay, cool. So the kind of the general consensus is that we all want to be in space together, with exceptions here and there based on whatever may be going on. Cool, great. That feels good to me. All right, any other thoughts, questions, comments around our upcoming return to hybrid meetings? All right, well, thanks again, everyone, for all your hard work getting this thought out and pulled together. All right, so moving on now to our questions only presentation. So we have 3 items there, and so board members had the opportunity to submit questions prior to today, and those questions were answered. So are there any other questions in either one of these 3 items that folks have?
I guess the only, I don't, in my copy of board docs, I don't see the actual attachment for the enrollment report. So anyway, if that could get included at some point so I can take a look at it.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get that out. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why that one is not.
Yeah, it's kind of curious. I see it there on your screen, but when I go in to board docs through my mechanism, it's not there. So anyway, we can figure that one out.
I have a little bit of a general question around enrollment. I think this was something I asked a while ago, and this may be, again, a little bit of my naivety around just how, certain things, but I think I'd asked a question around, what information might we have, data points that are less general and maybe more specific around why our enrollment is decreasing so significantly. And I know some of it, are likely trends across the region or the state. Like I know there are a few like potential bullet point or common answers. But I'm curious, like if there's been any outreach perhaps to folks that have recently left the district to get more information as to why, like what sort of work are we doing to really get a really good understanding specifically to our students and our community, why those folks, why are enrollments declining?
Yeah, I mean, enrollment is not a straightforward piece because there, as you were saying, there are lots of factors that contribute to attendance. We do have students who live in Tukwila and attend other school districts. We have students who attend Tukwila and live in other school districts. So those are boundary exceptions that we have. Every district has that. There's always a certain number of students that we look at. For me, I would try and look at trends or changes in that. So do we have more going out to other school districts who live in Tukwila? Generally, if they've moved, we don't always know if they've moved because we won't know until we get a request for records somewhere else. So typically that comes from the schools. And we also won't necessarily know their contact information because they're not letting us know. It's the new school district lets us know, and they're then requesting records. Sometimes if students move out of state, we don't even get that sometimes. So it can be a little bit of a challenge when we have more students moving out. Then there are options just around housing and what you're looking at. That ratio can change over time. We do have we do contract with a company called Davis Analytics that does our enrollment. There's another person who does a lot of enrollment projections for most states. His name is Les Kendrick. And usually if you get, have some of the folks giving you some of the projections, they do a low, medium, and high. So you usually get a range anyway. And what you're generally trying to look at is to see kind of what the ranges may be doing. And within those ranges in the analytics, they're looking at all sorts of things: price of housing, number of births at local hospitals, any of those changes that may be impacting that. But if we know about that, sometimes we do get information from families or students when they move out and they let us know maybe why. Otherwise, we might not have their contact information to even get a hold of them because they've just moved somewhere else and we just get the request from a school district.
So I will just say, I just was playing around, and I did, when I logged in through the Authenticate process to Word Docs, I can see it. So it looks like it may not, it's just not available to the public login, it looks like is the issue. So anyway, I found the enrollment report. But the other thing I wanted to say was, and I've said this before, but one of the biggest, I think the biggest factor in our enrollment decline in recent years has been when the Trump administration came in and basically shut off immigration. The number of refugee students we used to have was about 300. And I think the latest count was about 30 or 40. So, you know, a big chunk of our loss of enrollment in the recent years, I think, is tied to immigration policy. And so I think it's, you know, I would expect when the Biden administration came in, obviously they reversed that, but then COVID kind of stopped everything in its tracks. So it's not going to come back fast. But I think that's probably, from what, when in looking at the numbers, that's probably the biggest contributor to our loss, because we used to have a, you know, I mean, we still are to some degree a major settling point, but that may get tricky coming back to second line too, because of factors like Dr. Herndon mentioned. You know, the housing costs in our area obviously have gone up considerably. And so when you're a new immigrant coming in, you're looking for affordable housing initially. And although on the other hand, we do have a new bellwether and the new affordable housing project that just opened up. So anyway, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we know we were already seeing some new students coming from Afghanistan as refugees, and whether we'll see, you know, some coming from, you know, other places or not, we'll have to see. But that's, you know, I think when I looked at this, that's one of the biggest reasons.
Yeah, and I think projecting in the future, as I said when I first got here, I think providing free pre-K to families in our community. One, that's the right thing to do because we know it's extremely helpful. Pre-K is very expensive, plus it gives a great baseline for students to be exposed to all sorts of different learning environments, which is also good. And they get familiar with being in our schools and then they just enroll right up. So having pre-Ks will certainly help our enrollment in the future. Additionally, I think as Director Larson was mentioning, immigration policy probably impacting us more proportionally than some surrounding school districts. But in general, most King County school districts and even parts of Pierce County have been seeing decreased enrollments. It's COVID again kind of threw some pieces in there. Statewide, I think the state is down about 5% of public school enrollment across the state, regardless of region. So But I know even in the Puget Sound ESD area, which is about, I think we're 50, almost 60 school districts represented of various sizes. The ranges for being down are anywhere between like 2% and 15%, depending. We're averaging about 5% in Tukwila. So luckily we're on the lower side. There may be some places growing, places like Snoqualmie Valley, where they've been seeing a lot of additional building kind of in the East King County area. And certainly some places up in Snohomish County, which is not part of the Puget Sound Educational Service District. But Black Diamond is another one down in Enumclaw, Pierce County. There's a lot of building going on down there. So there is some migration happening down to more affordable housing areas.
When you mention like 5%, what's the time frame for that? Like 5% over the course
The last year.
year? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We've seen a slight decline anywhere between like 1 to 3 before that, but then COVID's been more like 4 to 5.
All is really helpful. Thanks so much for kind of walking through that to both y'all. I think one of the data points that just really intrigues me that I'm curious to get more insight around is the folks that still live in Tukwila but are choosing other districts. I want to know why. What needs are we not meeting in the district? How could we serve them differently or better? I'm super curious about that. And I'm sure still there are more reasons why folks may go externally to an outside district or a private school or a variety of different things. But that's what intrigues me is folks that still live here in our community that are opting out of our district and choosing another. So if you have any insight around that in future, I'd be super curious to hear about it. Or
Sure.
more. Any other questions on these questions only presentations? Okay, well, that brings us to our second opportunity for public comment. So if you, follow-up questions.
Got some action items too.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. That really takes us to the action items. So we have 3 action items for approval this evening. So the first one is action item 9A, approval of the human resources staffing report. I'll entertain a motion to approve that report.
So moved.
Second.
Any objections or discussion? No? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, okay, it stands approved. And then 9B is the approval of the board operating agreements that we have been working on over the last few weeks. So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any objections? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wonderful, it stands approved. And then lastly, the approval of meal prices for the 2022-2023 school year. I'll entertain a motion.
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Okay, any objections? All in favor?
Oh, wait a minute. I just have a discussion item.
Yes, sorry.
So this is interesting, and I've done a fair amount of, so what this is doing, we're moving to next year is where everybody gets a free meal. And so what's interesting about this is that, well, a couple things. It implements what's called the community CEP, what's it called? Community Eligibility Program, which is a federal program that allows districts that have, high percentages of students in poverty to essentially give free lunches and free meals to everybody in the district, and without having to collect all the forms and all that. And in past years, I believe we in this district have chosen not to take advantage of those, even though we meet the criteria. And the reason was the side effects of doing this, and I won't go into all of them, but it impact our funding system in other ways, which was disadvantageous for the district, which is unfortunate. However, in the last legislative session, the legislature passed a law that said if you qualify for this, that you must do it. So we don't have a choice here. So one of the things that's going to be interesting, the question I posed, I guess our CFO is still working on kind of the answer to this, is in the past years, typically the district has to subsidize the meal program to the tune of about $120,000 a year to cover expenses that the federal government doesn't cover. It also covers, for example, students who may not pay their bills, if something's due, we typically will eat that cost. And so as part of this. And so the question is, now that we're being kind of forced to go into this CE program, the question is, are we going to come out better as a result of it or not? Because originally when I heard this bill talked about, I thought that the state was going to cover the costs of doing this if there was a switch, but it turns out they aren't. And so this is going to be really interesting. And so I'm really interested when our CFO finishes the analysis of this in terms of, is this going to cost us more money or less money? Because then, if it costs us more money to do this overall, then, I need to start a advocacy campaign with the legislature to, not do this or to cover this unfunded mandate. And to give you an idea, this gets complicated in a hurry, but at the heart of it is what is how we measure, poverty, or, the federal government measures poverty as a rate of like $27,000 for a family of four, which is unfortunately the whole thing is based on that, and the federal system does not take into account regionalization. So we know that living in our area around Seattle costs a lot more in terms of housing, in terms of fuel costs, in terms of food costs, and so that's not taken into account in this system. And so this disadvantages particularly districts like ours that have a high demographic of lower income folks, but do not get to get the subsidies from the federal government because of that. And just to give you an idea, this particular program, this CEP, Community Eligibility Program that the federal government uses, they estimate that, or they use a number of the poverty in our district of 55%, whereas our free and reduced lunch rate is 79%. So it gives you an idea of how far off they are from a more realistic number. So anyway, this is going to be, this is great in terms of, obviously all the students will get a free meal. It's also great in terms of we won't have, the folks won't have to do the paperwork around collecting the applications from families for, do you qualify under the income levels and so forth and so on. So it will, hopefully save some money, but whether it will save enough money to offset the additional costs, undoubtedly there will be more free lunch served because of this. And so anyway, this is going to be a really interesting, this is not something we have a choice in, but it will be interesting. And I don't know if let's see, is Trevor? Oh, no, I guess he left. I don't know, Dr. Herndon, do you have any insights? Are we doing the analysis to figure out whether this is going to work for us or not?
Yeah, we will obviously do the financial analysis, and the challenge right now would be, what is the offset between the balances that students had previously, which is basically the cost that we're covering that you were talking about, versus now what we're obligated to do anyway. So either way, we're paying that money. So we're hoping that it's less, although now that the state is requiring more school districts to do this, we also wouldn't be the only ones voicing that kind of perspective to say, hey, it's not just us. So what I'll also do is have a conversation with the PSESD. I'm on their planning committee for area superintendent meetings and their superintendent advisory committee. So I think it's an important topic to look at. We haven't had that discussion so far. There have been a lot of other items, but it's an important one because then with that unified voice, especially from the roadmap districts, because my guess is those, we're the kind of districts that are going to qualify for this. It'll be important to make sure we get that information to the legislature.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna be yeah, that it'll be good to have a lot of people on our side as we go forward with this, because this is going to be a little bit of a tricky one to navigate. Hopefully we'll come out ahead, because I mean it's for the benefits of students, but we just don't want it to be hurting the financial side of districts as well. So anyway, thanks.
Did we finalize a motion?
Yeah, we're ready for a vote, I think.
Great.
Thanks so much for bringing that up. So basically what you're saying is this has a lot of benefit in the short term and also potentially some unintended outcomes or consequences long term.
Well, it will have benefit in the long. I mean, this is in place permanently unless they change it, of course. So all the students will be getting free meals, and that's a benefit. What we need to watch is really understand the financial impact of it, and if there's some adjustments. I mean, the state is working. There's a bunch of efforts going on. At the core of this is, how do I identify what's sometimes called economically disadvantaged students? What's the measure we're using to identify? That's the core of it. And is that what is being used? Is it accurate, for all districts? And that's the core, because I think, having studied this quite a bit, for us, it's not very accurate. For some districts, it is better accurate, the rural districts. And so anyway, but the state there are a lot of people at the state who are well aware of that. And so it may require some tweaking as we go forward, and we just need to keep track of it and advocate for getting it fixed so it works for our district. It definitely works for our students, but financially for our district. So that's it. Yep.
And
Okay.
Director Larson, Trevor's on now if you still have your question.
I'm not sure he's got any, I don't know if he has any additional insight beyond what I think Dr. Herndon probably covered it.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, I missed the option to join the panel when Debbie sent it to me.
I think we covered most of it. It was mostly around the financial impact of this move.
So the only insight that I would have maybe to add to that is that prior to COVID and everything, we were already being required to provide the students with meals anyway, whether they had a negative balance or not. So hopefully it'll turn around to where, because we potentially get more funding if we have more students, that maybe it'll offset that some. But like, I know our negative balance is pretty high right now because we can't refuse students anyway, which is, I mean, it's not a bad thing, but I'm hoping this will turn that around a little bit.
Yeah, the other side of this is how we use how the measure of essentially what was free and reduced is, how it permeates around the other funding systems like learning assistance program and things like that, which are outside of food services. But it's important to watch, understand all that as well.
Right.
All right. Thank you so much for jumping on, Trevor.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll all in favor of approving this action item, say aye.
Aye.
All right. It stands approved. And now we will go into our public comment. Thanks so much for catching that before Dr. Herndon. All right, so public comment, you have the opportunity to raise your hand or put your name in the chat to provide any public comment.
I don't see any hands raised or names in chat.
Give about another 10 seconds, just in case folks are fumbling to find that hand raised reaction or the chat button. Okay, wonderful. All right, then we are now going to move into executive session, which this executive session is to review the performance of a public employee per RCW 42.330.110. Do I need to do anything else to move us into executive session officially? I know I had to say the title. That was important.
How long?
Dr. Herndon, do you have any thoughts on how long you feel like this might take?
It's a good idea. Director Larson might have some insight, having been through this on the board side. My guess would be, anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it kind of depends on exactly how we're going to proceed on this, but you can always err on the conservative side and say an hour and then.
Okay, that's fine with me. So we will move to executive session for 60 minutes and return back at 8:46.
At this time, we need anyone who's not in the executive session to please remove themselves from this meeting.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Okay. At this time, I don't know that I can give Flip the ability to be host. So who would like to take host position? Carly?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And so what you want to do is stop recording and I will remove myself. And then when you're done with the executive session, please restart, just pause the recording. And when you come back from executive session, unpause it, call the motion, call the roll call and adjourn.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and
Okay, so we are back. Our executive session has ended. I'm probably not doing any of this right. And so we are going to move to adjourn our meeting. So I'll entertain a motion.
Just for Debbie's sake, just say what the time is, because I think she needs that.
Got it. It is 8:08
Okay,
p.m.
perfect.
Batman just fell over right here at my feet. So I move that we adjourn.
Is that him motioning?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Have a lovely rest of y'all's evening, everyone. Jan,
Thank
enjoy the
you
rest
all.
of your
All
trip.
right. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.